Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. As industries get more mature, what tends to happen in an economic system like the one we find in the Galactic Republic is that larger players begin to use their capital and the size of their operations to basically price out or just outlast smaller players. Corporate consolidation begins to happen as the larger companies continue to get bigger and the small companies struggle to survive. Until there's only one large player in that industry, like, Amazon. That creates a monopoly, or more commonly, you have a few big players which leads to an oligopoly. Kind of like how telecoms is arranged in the United States with Verizon, T-Mobile, and AT&T. One of the biggest issues with this type of corp consolidation is that the end user, the consumer, has less choice because of a lack of competition. And that sucks. I remember when I was a kid, you could walk into a computer store and there were all sorts of products, multiple racing wheels, flight sticks, a whole section of awesome keyboards. It seemed like you had endless choice back then. Of course, most of those small computer and electronic stores are now completely extinct. And what replaced them, Best Buy, is hardly even a retail store anymore. It's just a showroom that rents out space to larger brands. And your choice of electronic products is also severely limited. Now, Best Buy does face a lot of pressure from online retailers like Amazon, who definitely take a sizable chunk of their market, and so they have to limit how much inventory they keep in the stores. But at the same time, corporate consolidation is a huge player in why it seems like there's less choices for a variety of consumer products on our shelves today. And a lot of this is because of the way publicly traded companies are pressured by shareholders. If I'm an investor in Logitech, for instance, I might want the company to cut product lines that don't have as much demand. And that includes flight sticks and maybe some more niche keyboard designs that only a small portion of consumers actually enjoy. In the name of efficiency, big margins, and pleasing shareholders, a lot of these companies tend to dilute their own product lines, and that gives us, the end consumer, less choices. Oftentimes we're left with products that are just completely riddled with cost-saving adjustments, which makes them crap. Now, what happens when you have a much more vibrant and diversified industry where you can't get away with just, putting out a subpar product? Like the Starfighter industry in the Galactic Republic, which is segmented into thousands of small companies that all cater to specific local markets and clientele needs. Well, not only do you get competitive pricing and pretty good quality products, you're also going to get some really innovative and kind of batshit crazy designs, which I'm all for. Sure, overall, the Galactic Republic Starfighter industry is going to be a lot more risky to invest in because of how fragmented it is, but the end user has a crazy amount of choice, and that is awesome. Today we're going to be taking a look at some of the most interesting Starfighter technology that unfortunately was never mass produced for a variety of different reasons, but nonetheless are important achievements in Starfighter design. Kuat Systems Engineering, a subsidiary of Kuat Drive Yards, is the Starfighter wing of the larger shipbuilding corporation, and at least back in the days of the Republic, they were far less monolithic as a company. They were actually kind of a newcomer during the post-Rusan Reformation age. They still had the huge ring shipyard, which gave them an advantage when it came to cost, but only if they could generate enough demand to fill out the whole facility with production. The cloak-shaped fighter, or the CS Fighter, was an attempt by Kuat to attract civilian consumers and local security forces to their brand. This was one of the largest market segments in the post-Rusan reality. While the cloak-shaped fighter wasn't the most powerful or agile or fastest design, it was definitely one of the most modular starfighters on the market. It's kind of like the Corellian freighter of starfighters. The amount of factory upgrades and customization on this thing was impressive. The CS Fighter was a remarkably simple design, and more importantly, had a lot of universal adapters on it, which accepted all sorts of third-party aftermarket parts, which is just a really wonderful thing for a corporation to do. You just don't expect that, right? And when I say extremely modular, I really do mean it. I mean, you could put a stronger power generator on this thing, you could have a greater fuel storage, stronger weapons, more advanced sensors, different types of targeting computers, more powerful engines and shields. Heck, you can even convert the cockpit into an escape pod. The only thing you really couldn't fit into this thing was a hyperdrive, but you could buy a hyperdrive sled that was automated that could, do all of that heavy lifting for you. The CS Fighter attracted a wide variety of different customers because of its modularity. Gangbangers and gearheads especially loved the Courage Engineering rear wing and stabilizer conversion kit. I guess some people need downforce even when they're flying. Such modifications were so popular on the CS Fighter that a lot of people actually thought the spoiler just came with the ship. The Jedi and Judicials also used this ship and had their own preferred modification as well, known as the White Cloak Fighter variant. By the time of the Battle of Yavin, it was virtually impossible to find a CS fighter that was, original and stock. It just didn't happen. Too often, manufacturers put profit over usability for their products, but by following the Corellian Engineering Corporation method, Kuat Systems Engineering built a ship that a pilot could grow with and upgrade throughout the years, which is, I think, what every captain wants. Now, Kuat Systems Engineering could have designed a starship that refreshes its technology, its look every few years to encourage people to buy new products. They could have removed the universal adapters and, developed their own proprietary connection systems to make it very hard to mod this vessel, but they didn't do that. But with the Cloakshake Fighter, what Kuat Systems Engineering was focused on wasn't just profits, it was also focused on creating brand loyalty and truly watching out for the consumer. One of the unique features on Mandal Motors Starfighters is that they usually feature S-foils that rotate around the fuselage of the vessel. This, combined with thrust vectoring, made the movement of Mandal Motor fighters extremely difficult to predict. The Starviper class attack platform took this type of design to the next level. Now, this is a custom designed ship that was ordered by Xizor, a failing prince who ran the Black Suns. The ship featured a balanced gyroscopic central cockpit that had 4 extendable S-foils with weapons mounted onto it. The S-foils could be extended and retracted depending on what mode the Starfighter was in. Like an X-Wing, when the S-foils are fully deployed, you have additional laser cannons that can be brought to bear on the enemy, and when speed and maneuverability are more important, the S-foils can go horizontal. These ships were exceptionally expensive to build, and Xizor apparently bought the rights to the design after Mandal Motors produced the ship for him. Now, after his death, Mandal Motors would repurpose the rights for this ship, and they would mass produce it, with a few features missing to make it more affordable. This version of the Starviper would be widely used by the Zan Consortium, and in skirmishes against the New Republic and the Empire, it was said that this vessel outperformed both the RZ-1A Wing Interceptor and also the TIE Interceptor. It should be noted the Starviper carried one last nasty surprise, and that is buzz droids. When the 501st, under Anakin's command, arrived on Umbaran, they were completely unprepared for the hell they were about to face. Umbaran was a shadow planet hidden in a nebula, meaning there was very little visible light on the planet. And the people on the planet were, kind of weird and standoffish, perhaps a little xenophobic and isolationist. It's either that or the combat drugs that are being pumped into their system as they enter the battlefield. The Umbarans, unlike other isolated societies, did manage to develop their own parallel technology and machines that in many ways was far more advanced than what the Republic had to offer. I mean, just ask the 501st about the massive insect-like walkers they had to fight on the planet. It's the stuff of nightmares. But what I want to focus on today is the Xenos 33 Umbaran Starfighter, which has a relatively unique design. For instance, the cockpit is just open. There's no physical barrier like a transparent steel window or canopy. Instead, a ray shield keeps the pilot safe from external threats. The cockpit itself is also pretty interesting. The command chair is equipped with a repulsor lift, allowing the pilot to kind of float in place. And the controls aren't physical, they're holographic, requiring the users to create all sorts of hand gestures in order to move the ship around. While there might not be any feedback from this type of control system, the hologram controls were exceptionally sensitive, and the pilot's body, even with the repulsor lift powered chair, could feel all of the G-forces. No one really asked the Umbarans to reinvent the cockpit and the flight controls, but they did anyway. So good for them. When you see a tri-wing TIE fighter, you know it's going to be packing something serious. And the TIE PH, or Phantom Multi-Role Stealth Starfighter, is a great example of this idea. It's fairly well equipped for a TIE fighter. It has shields, pretty heavy armor, and a Class 1 hyperdrive. But it also costs around 365,000 credits, which made it a lot more expensive than both the Avenger and Defender, which arguably are more powerful offensive and defensive fighters. But that's because the Phantom Starfighter uses a Stygium crystal-powered cloaking device that makes the ship naked, not only to sensors, but also the naked eye. When the Rebellion found out that the Empire had done this, they were actually shocked because generally you can't put a cloaking device on a ship this small, but the engineers at Senior were pretty good at what they did. On top of that, Stygium crystals are far more rare than Kuiper crystals, and so this ship was never really going to be mass produced or change the galaxy, but it's a really cool design. You guys might remember Asajj Ventress's Genevex class Fanblade Starfighter. It looks exactly like a fan that some ruthless assassin pretending to be a lady-like concubine would utilize. It's actually perfect for Asajj if you think about it. But the technology behind the ship is actually really cool. You see, the Geonosian-class fan blade is based off of Asajj's master's own private ship, the Solar Sailor. These type of vessels use a large sail that captures background radiation that is everywhere in deep space for movement. The Geonosian also utilizes this propulsion technology, but here's the thing. These fans not only could capture energy to propel the vessel forward, they were also able to absorb all incoming energy weapons in a safe way that wouldn't damage the ship, giving Asajj a very unique type of defense that's kind of like a deflector shield, but not exactly. The Geonosian fan blade was also deployed with 2 fully articulating laser cannons that could fire off-board. Another very intimidating feature for this awesome vessel. You guys remember when we went after Osama in Pakistan without the Pakistanis' permission? Well, to get to the AO without the Pakistani government realizing, the strike team took in 2 Night Stalker Blackhawks that were painted completely matte black and also had a much more streamlined fuselage, making it harder for radar to detect it. Unfortunately, all of those modifications seem to have weighed down this Blackhawk a little bit, because we're actually not supposed to know about the existence of the stealth Blackhawk. But when one of the delivery vehicles for the Osama raid lost lift on approach and crash, well, the world found out. Our next Starfighter was actually designed with a similar mindset as the stealth version of the UH-60 Blackhawk. We, of course, are talking about the Stealth X, a heavily modified version of an old favorite, the T-65 XJ Series X-Wing. Designed specifically for Luke Skywalker's new Jedi Order, the Stealth X was able to take advantage of a Jedi pilot's natural force abilities and remove several navigational tools and sensors and aids that normal pilots would need. In this way, the Stealth X isn't all that different from pre-Clone Wars Jedi Starfighters like the Delta 7 Ether Sprite, except the modification on this thing were a lot more complicated and complete. For instance, the entire ship is painted matte black, and most of the external sensors and antennas have been removed from the ship. Like the Stealth UH-60, which totally doesn't exist, the Stealth X had specially built moldings made out of fiberplast to reduce radar signature. The third proton torpedo launching tube on this X-Wing was replaced by a gravity shield, which essentially shields the X-Wing from mass detection sensors. Even the power plant was changed slightly to use a type of special Tabana fuel that burned completely clear. The shields were also slightly downgraded to fit in all the extra equipment. And instead of proton bombs, the Jedi used shadow bombs, which are basically proton bombs you guide with the Force. Pretty cool. The most terrifying part of any Space Marine's battle is probably the moment he realizes they have to engage in a contested boarding operation. These type of missions incorporate all the worst aspects of a CQB firefight, with an additional no explosives rule because, you could decompress the entire ship into space if you're not careful. Now, if you're unlucky enough, not only will you be partaking in a boarding mission, you might also have to rely on a boarding pod that is launched at the enemy ship's hull, where it must somehow latch on and chew its way inside of the targeted vessel. Should that pod get knocked off its trajectory or just miss, you might be floating in deep space for quite some time. A lot of things can go wrong at this stage, and I think for a Space Marine or any infantry fighter, not being in control of the situation is tough, because someone else is piloting and basically making sure you stay alive. This is where the TIE boarding craft comes into play. Yes, if there is a niche need, Senior Fleet Systems will create a prototype for their very modular base TIE fighter design. The TIE boarding craft looks just like a TIE bomber, except in the secondary pod you have an entire contingent of troopers rather than bombs. While not the most maneuverable vessel in the world, the TIE boarding craft is heavily armored and well armed and provides a great deal more protection for the soldiers inside on the way to their target. Once the ship reaches its target, a boarding claw extends out with a laser cutter, which should be able to cut right through the hull. The Geonosians are another very unique and interesting race. Most of their population are hive drones and warriors who lack independent thought and autonomy. They are quite different from the rest of the galaxy, and the design of their starfighter, the Nantex class, is a great example of this. First, the ship itself is made up of thin, pliable strands of lamina steel, a very flexible and strong material used originally for Geonosian hives. Once bent into the position that they want it to set in, an engineer then applies heat to the lamina steel, which then hardens. Hard points on the surface of the vessel were secured by magnets and could be pretty much placed anywhere. This ship was actually quite modular if you think about it. Another real cool feature with this ship is that the exterior of the ship is actually lined up with 100 miniature independently aimed tractor beams and repulsor lifts, which essentially target and repulse different things around the ship to give it far more mobility and very weird physics-defying movements. Ultimately, a lot of the features we've discussed in this video are quite niche and probably too expensive to deploy en masse. But it is really nice to see so many different types of innovative designs and philosophies for building a product. Sometimes it's not just about, meeting shareholder expectations or meeting, an analyst's earning expectations. Sometimes it's just about being passionate and really kind of motivated to do cool and new things. And I think, if a society loses, their admiration for these kind of deeds, maybe we have to kind of shift how we take a look at value in society. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy. I'll see you next time.